Welcome everybody to Write Better Together. I'm Jon Meyers. Hey, look everybody, it's Emily Brooks.
Hello, Jon Meyers.
Hey. What's up, man?
Whoa, we have quite the list to talk about today.
I like
and quite the guest.
List.
We have, for the second time, Rene Gutteridge.
Oh my gosh, that's this episode? I'm so glad. She's so smart.
Yes, she is, and she's going to be talking, because we talked about this briefly when we went to WriterCon. Rene did a session on Deep POV, and specifically how, I think it was called How Film is Ruining Your Writing or something like that.
Yeah, it
like
was
your prose.
very
And
edgy title.
It was one of the best sessions that we went to. So great. So we actually have her here to talk about that today on how to write in Deep POV.
There isn't a time where she speaks on anything that I don't learn something new, and it's a viewpoint that I've never heard before. It's not like taking a good point and then making it even better and expanding upon it. It's a brand new, fresh, new, novel, good point.
Yeah, I had never heard it put the way that she put it, and it changed my writing. Like, it actually changed my writing. So be excited for this episode.
Yep.
Before that, we're going to have listener responses to calls to action and just to videos and stuff.
Yes.
And we're going to have Rene's going to give you all a new call to action.
Oh.
Then we're going to learn something together in our Hey Jon Meyers segment, and then we're going to play a silly game.
Yay.
But first.
Yes.
We both got out of our bubbles.
We did.
I'm assuming.
Yes.
Funnily enough, in the actual interview of this episode, I'm in Florida. So I'm going to be transported through time and space.
Backwards and forward at the same time.
So I was out of my bubble during this episode.
Yes. That's it. That's not a story.
No, I actually wanted to say my favorite thing about going to Florida is, one, the nostalgia, because I grew up going to Florida. And so we got to return to a lot of places that I went to with my grandparents and things like that. But I got to go with Jon. So it's always special when we get to do that. The other thing is I love the environment there and taking pictures. Like, I don't know why, but I'm not as inspired. Like, I am inspired to take pictures here, but when I'm there, it's like I want my camera on me the whole time. And so I got to take some really fun, like I got to go on some really fun hikes and take some pictures. And I think we haven't really talked about this much, but well, I guess we did in our hobbies episode, like early on, like one of our first episodes. Having other hobbies like inspires creativity. And for me, like getting out my camera and taking pictures and seeing the world through that lens, like makes me feel so creative and energized. And so I had a lot of fun. Here's some pictures. I saw a spoonbill, which is one of my favorite birds.
I was waiting to interject. I wanted to ask what the question. wanted to ask what the bird who had a spoon nose, and I imagine it's this one.
Yes, on my social media, I shared that. Actually, on my blog post today, I shared that one too, because it's my favorite picture that I've gotten.
What kind of bird is that?
It's a roseate spoonbill.
Is it related to pelicans or related to eagles, or what's it related to? Anything? Flamingos? Or no, is it something?
You always ask me questions that I'm like, oh no, I have to
look
up.
Expert, man.
They're very like crane-like and like heron-like, but they're not. They are similar to flamingos in that they're pink because of their diet.
Oh.
They're also only found in a few places in the United States, and one of those is Sanibel Island, where we saw 5 of them, and they're just very cute.
Do other animals grab them and use the spoons as a tool?
Oh gosh, I hope not.
Okay, those are my 2 questions about it.
Here's a purple gallinule, which is kind of a rare bird, which was fun to see. And I waited forever to get this picture. Forever. So that was fun. I always enjoy that. And now what my blog post today was about is, after being in that lovely place that inspires so much creativity, I'm having to learn to recognize the beauty in things around me here too. and find creativity even in a space that doesn't naturally inspire me as much as Florida does.
You want to be one of those people that see wonder in everywhere and
Yeah,
everything.
and I love Tennessee, by the way. It's my favorite environment that I've been to in the United States. It's just that it's winter right now. So, and it's snowing. It's cold.
You didn't mention the alligators.
I saw lots of alligators. They
They're
don't
not.
inspire much creativity, but they inspire something. Probably fear.
All right, before you move on, I have a question about your photographic skills.
Oh.
It was clear to me there was something different about these photos, and I've seen other photos of birds that you've taken, that you and the comments don't say, "Oh, I'm having," like you just said now, "I'm having so much fun," and it was so fun. But you could tell there was joy in those photographs. Why and like how did that come across to me? Because you weren't saying that in the comments, and
Oh
so
man.
but there was like a lightness and a joy in these photographs that weren't in whatever the other photographs you shared of some other bird in the past.
Okay, so that's a really interesting question. I don't know if I can answer it, but I can answer that the pictures that I shared are the ones that I thought were worth framing.
Oh,
And the ones that I think are worth framing are the ones that have more light and more contrast. And usually I choose ones where the birds have good expressions on their faces. You can really see the light in their eyes. So maybe that is just me choosing, because I have a dozen, actually, like a couple dozen photos on my camera, but I shared the ones that I thought had the most life and light in them. So maybe that's
yeah.
why.
No, because I was gonna ask, like, what did you use their eye line, or was it their faces? And you just mentioned it was their face part. Like
Yeah.
you chose the ones that had expressive faces, and so
Yeah.
that came through. So
Now, the Gallinule was the only picture I got of the Gallinule because it was so fast running across. But I had to have that picture. But the ibis one, where here's the ibis one, is my favorite because I saw the ibis standing there. I'd seen a million ibises that week, like probably hundreds of ibises. But that setting was like the most beautiful lighting. It had green contrasting colors with the white bird in front of it, and then its like little leg was sticking out. And so that one to me is like one of my favorite pictures now, because sometimes you just see one and you go, that's the perfect framing for that bird.
and that's why we're the #1 writing podcast for bird lovers, bird
And I want to
watchers,
add
and
too,
birds.
as I'm sharing this for those watching, I'll share some of the other pictures just to show the comparison, like some of the ones where there's not as much contrast or the bird isn't looking in the right direction, that you can just tell the difference.
As great as that was, you didn't bring a pelican home.
I know. I do love pelicans though. But at least I didn't murder one.
What are you talking about? I don't know what you're talking about. So tell the people that I did not murder a real pelican in real life.
No, but he murdered one in the story, so. Which reminds me that I have a friend reading Brandon Sanderson books now, and anytime something violent happens, he blames me.
Yeah, I was just figuring out a way to blame you for the murder of that bird because
He's like,
you and
this character just killed a dog. Emily, how could you? And I'm like,
yeah,
I'm not Brandon Sanderson.
I understand your friend's point because I was figuring out just as you said that you gave me the prompt. I was going to blame you for the
Yeah,
death
that's
of that
true. But it's supposed to
fictional
be a
bird.
romantic comedy. All right, anyway, this has gone forever. How did you get out of your bubble?
It's so wonderful forever. I went to see Paddington
Yes, you
in
did.
Peru. I went all the way to Peru,
Wow.
and my story is short. My story is short. My story is short. Um, there was a tie-in to a previous Hey John Myers in this, and I think I can tell you what it is without doing any spoilers. So what would you guess? Just just a guess what of your previous Hey John Myers is Paddington in Peru, what the tie-in would be.
Incan string writing.
Ding, ding, ding.
Really?
You got it, man. So
I'm actually
Paddington,
surprised.
Paddington's Aunt Lucy had a bracelet, which I won't tell you where she got it from, but the bracelet was tied into knots, and
Ah,
the knots were translated into the Incan language because it was the
that's
Incan knot
amazing.
language, and that's how they got into the place was through that bracelet, was through the language that was decoded through the knots. So
That's
there you
amazing.
go. So I understood it. I could have gone on the same adventure with my friend Paddington.
I love it. That's awesome.
There you go.
And did you
That's
like
it.
the film?
I did like the film.
Good. Well, now we have listener responses.
Oh,
It's fun because we never know where we're going to get responses and what's going to stick with people. So this one is from our webinar on perfectionism, where I shared a Hey Jon Meyers / Hey Everybody about the importance of forgetting. And at RadioForYahweh commented, I've tried explaining this to people. If I don't care, I will delete it from my memory bank. I don't believe it's deleted, but like in a cache somewhere in my brain. I can remember some events to a T and others I hardly remembered the day or events. Yep. I also realized this when a friend and I got into an argument. We were coworkers but never talked. I got kicked out of my apartment and she ended up offering me to stay at her place. I left out all the details because that was our argument's issue. She remembered that day completely differently than I did. But when I finally stopped and listened while recollecting my own memories, neither of us were wrong. She just remembered different things about that day, the 2-day event that I did not store as a key or keep memories.
I love that. That's one of my favorite responses
It's
we've
so
had
good.
on the YouTube.
Well, and it's such a specific example. And what's funny is we were just talking because when in Florida, we were staying with John's, our friends, but John met his friend as his roommate in college. And when they're recollecting stories from college, it's like John has kept everything. Like he remembers everything. Whereas his friend is like, dude, I never would have remembered that if you hadn't mentioned it. So it's funny to me how we remember different things, maybe because of an emotional response to it or something about it stood out that we thought was important that somebody else maybe didn't see it from that perspective.
Very true.
So
Very
thank
true.
you at RadioForYahweh for sharing that.
It goes to show that there's always someone watching, that there's
Mm,
always someone, like, you never know what's going to impact them.
mm,
And so I just had this conversation yesterday with someone else who I will not name, who I gave them some of those numbers of how many people were watching the webinar but didn't chime in, didn't acknowledge that they were there, but they registered as a person who was watching it. And you don't, if no one comments and no one says anything, you don't know who watched it or who saw it.
yeah.
And so anyway, that was my point, is that when you don't put the grocery cart back or you don't hold the door open for a woman, there's someone going to notice that you didn't do that
Yeah.
or that you did do that.
Yeah.
That's all.
So, y'all, this conversation is so great, and I hope you get a lot out of it. Get your notebooks out and your pens and write things down. We're going to be talking to Rene Gutteridge about Deep POV. Let me tell you a little bit about Rene. She has been writing professionally for over 20 years with diversified expertise in fiction, nonfiction, comedy sketches, novelizations, and screenwriting. She is the multi genre author of 24 novels, plus several nonfiction titles. Her indie film Skid won Dead Center's Best Oklahoma Feature in 2015, and in 2016, her novel My Life as a Doormat was adapted into the Hallmark movie Love's Complicated. She is co writer on the feature film Family Camp, a Movie Guide Award winner, and a Dove Award nominee for 2023. She is also a Screencraft finalist in True Crime.
Yep.
So
100%.
she's awesome.
Smart.
Here's our. Oh,
Screencraft is going away, by the way, but we won't go into detail. But
oh, okay.
we should mention that since we just mentioned
Oh,
Screencraft.
sure.
So.
Yeah, that's fair. All right. Here's our conversation with Rene.
And we're back. Hey, I'm Jon Meyers. Look, I'm still Jon Meyers. It's still Emily Brooks. Emily Brooks, who's this other person? And you're not in your normal place. What's going on?
Wow, that was a lot to respond to, but hello, and look, everybody, it's Rene Gutteridge.
Hello.
And where's Rene coming to us from?
My normal place.
Your normal
I am
place.
in my normal place, yes.
I'm in the abnormal place.
At my desk.
I realized when we start these, because we've already recorded like your introduction and everything, then I go, hey, where'd she come from? Well, Emily just told me 5 seconds ago where she came from and the audience. So I do know who she is because Emily just read the entire bio.
That's true. That is true. And yeah, I'm not in my normal place. I'm in Naples, Florida. So I'll just be like suddenly in Naples during this part, but not for the rest of the episode.
Do you have a pelican to bring on and show?
I don't. We talked
Rene?
about me kidnapping a pelican and bringing it on, but that was, I have seen lots of pelicans though.
All right. What are we really here for?
Yeah.
Pelican talk.
So, Rene, my first introduction to you was your talk at WriterCon about Deep POV. Okay. And it was so good. And I feel like we've mentioned it even a couple times, but we've never like really dug deep into it. So we wanted to talk to you for a full episode about Deep POV and how it really improves our writing in general. So if you want to get us started on describing what does that even mean?
Yeah, well, at first, writers have to understand point of view in fiction, and you kind of learn it and you go, okay, I've got to make sure that I don't head hop, to make sure that I stay in one character's point of view for the entire chapter, entire scene or whatever. And then you get to decide, as you go along, well, how many points of view do I want in the book? And you just sort of, as a writer, begin to hone that craft of point of view. And a lot of times I think we then get sort of stagnant and we think of point of view as, well, I know the rules of it. But we don't always understand what a useful tool it is in crafting our whole story. It's often just thought about as a rule and not as part of the creative process. And so when I teach deep point of view, what I'm saying to writers is, if you can learn to wield this in a creative way, it's going to develop your character into a character that is thought about long after the book is over, and the character itself will create a page turner because you've created a depth to the character that is more than just what they see and what they're doing.
Let me interject here that so when Emily and I were in your class, I had no idea that I would be. So I'm in the middle of turning a sitcom, an unsold sitcom pilot, into a novel, and we mentioned before that this would be life changing, right? Your class, and this, what you're about to talk about, will be life changing, and I'm just now, because I outline extensively. I'm just now starting the writing but a lot of it's already written because the outline's already written. First of all, it was a completely different creature, obviously, but there's not a page that goes by where I don't remember this lesson. And so it's infused itself in the novel.
That's fantastic.
And Emily has said the same thing.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because one of the things that you started off talking about at WriterCon was the difference like between cinematic writing and deep POV. So like turning a script, specifically like taking that into a deep POV, really demonstrates the tool that it is.
Yeah.
And you've done that too, right? Like you've turned scripts into novelizations and things like that too.
Yeah, it's one of the things, one of the hardest things to get modern writers to let go of is the idea of seeing their novels cinematically,
Mm-hmm.
because we all watch so much cinema that we automatically see it as a movie.
Right.
And as we're seeing it as a movie, we're writing it as we see it, and that creates a very shallow point of view, because for the most part, in reference to what we're talking about, films don't have point of view. Now they do, and there's ways to create that in film, but for what we're talking about, they don't have that point of view, that inner monologue. So breaking that habit, I kind of began to see this as, I was crossing back and forth between movies and books, and beginning to see these problems in these manuscripts that I couldn't really identify at first. And when I finally did identify what the problem was, it was all about what the character was doing on the page, and no deeper than that. And so that's when I started teaching this a little more vigorously than I might have before when I was teaching fiction. Because, years ago, I mean, I've been teaching fiction since the early 2000s. I didn't really see as much of this. It has progressively gotten worse as people watch more cinema than they do read. So that's what the habit we're trying to break is, to stop writing your novel like a movie and create a different entry point rather than just showing their action.
We
You
have
know,
told so many guests on this show, it is not a scene, it's a passage. You're writing a book.
right, right, right.
And where did we learn that?
Exactly.
Yeah, and that terminology is really for the writer to think about in terms
Mm-hmm.
of changing their brain and how they're trying to think about it. And I do, because I shift back and forth between writing novels and writing film, I have to shift my brain too, pretty dramatically. In fact, I don't think I you told you guys about this last time I was here, about the study they did on writers' brains.
Mm-mm.
Did I share this?
Nope.
So I think it was in Germany. They decided to study a writer's brain. I don't know why, and it was. I think this was in the New York Times, but I'm not sure. So they took two groups of writers. One group considered themselves hobbyist writers, and the other group were professional novelists. And so they put the first group, the hobbyists, into these MRI machines and asked them to just work on the story while their brains were being analyzed. And so what they saw was the part of the brain that lit up was the part of the brain that you solve problems with, like you solve a puzzle with, you know. And so that was like made sense, right? It was like, okay, that makes sense. When they put the professional writers into the MRI machine, what they saw was the speech center lit up. And the reason for that is because professional novelists sink so deep into their characters that they're creating the voice of the character. They're using the speech center, how the character
Wow.
sees the world, and how the character speaks into the world and speaks to himself. Um, so that, to be able to prove scientifically uh, that novels should be written in that way, is fantastic. Of course, you have to use the logical puzzle solving part of your brain to map out your book, But after that, then if you can shift over to your speech center and tell the story through your character's voice and lens, you just have a much better book, a much better character.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was
As you
really interesting.
Oh man, as we've been talking about this, I was trying to think of examples of books that do that and books that don't. And I've talked about this on the podcast before, but A Man Called Uva, A Man Called Uva, by Frederick Bachman. And the whole thing is so close in this man's mind that even like the prose, like the one of the characteristics of this guy is that he gives nicknames to everybody. So like, he doesn't remember their actual names, but he remembers the titles that he's given them. And so in the prose, you have the titles that he's given them, not their actual names, because you're so deep into his voice rather than the writer just describing things.
Mm-hmm.
And you get his little grumpy side comments, and they're not italicized like as separate from the prose. They're just part of the prose.
That's right. Yeah, that's the, when you start, when I start teaching this for writers who have separated out dialogue with italics,
Mm-hmm.
this is a really hard change for them to make, to integrate the thoughts right into the narrative.
Yeah.
But it weaves the story together so tightly, that it all just flows. The inner monologue, the action, the dialogue, all of it flows so tightly together that it's the difference between watching it unfold and experiencing it.
Yeah.
When we watch movies, that's all we get to do is observe. We're observing the movie, but in novels, we get to experience it. If that inner monologue and inner voice comes through the narrative, when you take out a thought and italicize it, you're actually coming out of the character in a sense. You're bobbing to the surface a little bit, and the reader has to stop and study the thought, right? And so the more modern way to write in this deep point of view, I think, is the way to create great characters. And the more I've done it, the more I've loved it. I started making that transition several years ago in my writing, and I loved it. I couldn't get enough of being in the point of view of this character so deeply that I was thinking about him through a lens. And that lens is super important. Um, it's, if you have ever gone to therapy, a lot of therapists will talk in a way that uses this terminology that you have a lens that you look through, sometimes multiple
Mm-hmm.
lenses, and these lenses that you wear distort. Uh, they distort life so that you are seeing the world differently than somebody else because of this distortion. And often it comes from trauma, childhood hurts, or things like that. And every time you experience one of those as a person, another lens goes up, so that when you are confronted with something in life, you're looking through this distorted lens. We should put those distortions on our characters, and so that they're seeing the world wrong. And when you can start a novel with your character seeing the world wrong, then you have a starting point for a character arc, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love that terminology and way of looking at it. Definitely one of the things that I did, because Jon Meyers mentioned it, it changed both of our writing, is I went back and revised my novel, got rid of any italics, just those italicized thoughts, and tried to think, how is my character revealing this in the prose instead?
Mm-hmm.
I think even just starting there is a great start.
It
And it
What
is.
wasn't
are
just us. We heard
yeah.
other people from that class are like, I got to go home and start all over now,
Yeah, yeah.
which is a great thing.
It
Yeah.
is, yeah.
Emily, have you found it to be fun to
Yeah.
sink deeper that way into your own work?
Yeah, for sure, and it helps because when you're writing in second person especially, it can feel hard to, really characterize your character in the prose, but when you think of it as deep POV, then all of it is characterizing the character. You have to force it through other people or through dialogue or they're looking at a mirror or anything like it. It's just coming a lot more naturally that this is their perspective on the world. And honestly, like even the revisions I did, I'm like, I could go deeper, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I could go
Mm-hmm.
even deeper.
And the key to it too is, not just to, it doesn't just affect the character's thoughts and inner monologue. It affects how they see and interpret the world and what you decide to put on the page. So, one of the things that makes a novel drag or feel like it's heavy and hard to get through is typically either an overabundance of inner monologue where it just sounds like the character is just talking to himself, and you just want to get out of that conversation. um,
Yeah.
or an overabundance of actions or micro actions that don't matter to the story. And so when you are writing your different passages, when you're looking at what your character notices matters, and if it doesn't matter to the character, then it doesn't matter to the page. So, if you're trying to describe a room, you're trying to anchor your scene into a place, right? Let's say the train station. And you're trying to anchor that, which you need, so you don't just have this nebulous feeling. Um, you don't need to describe every part of that train station.
Mhm.
What you need to describe is every part of the train station that your character notices and cares about, either the crowds or the smells or whatever, or the way that, the walls look or the floor is sticky. Those, whatever matters to your character, gets on the page. And then that allows that even the setting is pouring into developing your character, and it just enriches and enriches and enriches to the point that you really don't have to work that hard, trying to
Mm.
develop this character, because every part of the story is working for you. And that's one of the things that I really try to emphasize in teaching writing is every tool that you're using should be doing double time in something. So it should be, if your setting is anchoring your scene, it should also be developing your character. You don't let any of your tools get away with just, I'm just doing one thing today. It's like, no, you got to work. If you're going to be in this story, you got to work hard for me and get down what I want you to get down. So, and I've used this before a lot of times, things like if you have a chef, does he see the color green or does he see the color of kale? How we describe, as writers, we see the world completely differently than the rest of the population. And you decide what your character does in life, and then because of what they do, how do they see the world?
Yeah, and for fantasy authors, you can do a lot of world building through that by having a character think about, like, if they're do a metaphor or comparing something to another thing. That's a great way to throw in world building details. Like
Oh
the
yeah.
example you just gave of the chef, maybe it's not kale, maybe it's some other strange thing in that world that you've created. It reminds me of this creature, or um, or this kind of plant that doesn't actually exist, but it's a way of making the world richer.
Yeah. Yeah. World building and fantasy, boy, they have a job, don't they?
Yeah. Yeah. But that's
Now
often
I'm
how I see them doing it, is through what is the character thinking about when they see this thing, and that can kind of trigger another thing, and then yeah.
That's good.
now I'm wondering. I'm not going to start all over again. Tear it up and start all over again. No. So now I'm wondering. I think this is a new epiphany that I've just had. Are you in the middle of a novel, or you just finished one, Renee?
No, I'm in the middle of a movie actually right now.
Okay,
Oh,
so the
nice.
last novel you finished, did deep point of view, the stuff that we're talking about, affect your choice of who was going to narrate the story?
Audiobook wise or a
No,
point
no,
of view
no.
wise?
Just the
Oh,
point of view wise. So
oh, sure.
if you yeah, so if you have a I don't know, a father-daughter story, that you had to make that choice, who's when Emily said second person, that's what started this train of thought in my brain. And
I guess I meant third person,
Oh,
right?
I thought
Third
you were
person.
like, but I thought, boy, that's ambitious.
No,
that's what I
I
thought too. I
I
thought you
realize
meant
now
that.
I meant third person. Yeah.
No,
Okay.
but it made me think. So that choice is going to matter. And so I guess if you said you were in the middle of one, but I'll say on the last one that you finished, did you start with knowing who the narrator was going to be, or did that change while you were outlining?
Well, I always know who
Who this?
the protagonist is. So
Okay.
that's where you start, and understanding that with every point of view that you add splits the reader's loyalty. So the more points of view you have, the less attached a reader will get
Oh.
to your
Hmm.
characters, which is one good argument for keeping it low, 2 or 3. Now, I've written ensemble pieces before, but they were in comedy. And so that is a great genre to use that in because of just the way the genre works. But yeah, I mean, you have to decide: do I want the antagonist point of view in there, and why? What would be the point of it? And so there's definitely decisions to be made, but just understanding that with each point of view that you add, there needs to be a lot of decision made of what that takes away from your primary protagonist. Um, Romances typically do have two, the male and the female, but not always. So, it's just how you design your book, I guess.
I read, so in fantasy there's often, I mean, there could be 15 point of views, like you just never know. And so I'm always interested in, like, why did the author decide to go into the POV of this character now? Because you
Mm-hmm.
have the protagonist is in the scene. So why this character? And I think some of it can be for fun, like they're exploring, a different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
It's helping the world, like build the world. Sometimes it feels unnecessary, but other times you're like, oh, this is telling me a lot about the protagonist, actually seeing them from a
Yep.
different perspective. Or if your protagonist is always seeing things in a gloomy way, then that's affecting the description. And so you can have a character who sees things in a different way and they're seeing the world completely different, which again, for fantasy writers, for world building, can help so that okay, just because your protagonist is describing things this way doesn't mean that it actually is that way,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense.
Well, and having multiple points of view actually can create a pacing for certain genres that works.
Mm-hmm.
So, you're moving the story forward through various characters, and it creates this very snappy type
For
pacing
sure.
that works. And like you said, Emily, it's also revealing. And again, we're killing two birds with one stone. It's you're learning about one character, revealing information about another character in a more organic way, so
Mm-hmm.
that primary character doesn't have to tell a lot about himself. Somebody else is revealing that information. So it's just cleverly utilizing all these points of view to work out best for your story. Action and high pace genres work well with multiple points of view, because if you're in one point of view, the whole story has to unfold through those eyes. And for a genre where you're expecting this to be a page turner like suspense or thriller, you have to work really hard to create that pacing with one point of view.
Yeah. That makes sense. Plus, a lot of these fantasies are sweet, like they're sweeping. They're covering so much ground that
Yes.
the characters can't be everywhere at once, because you've got this character's doing this adventure over here and this other character's doing this over here. It's just it's so different.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Jon Meyers, now I'm curious how, when you're writing or turning your script into a novel, how you're doing that, like,
Well,
and choosing the POV and adapting that.
Well, I threw the script away, and but I kept the outline from the script. But then I dismantled that and I wrote a new outline because it's a novel. It's not a script.
Yeah.
But it is an ensemble, and so that's why I'm sitting here being quiet. And there's 8 people, which is low for me, and they're kind of pair off in twos, so it's really, they're not couples, but it's 4 pairs of 2 in their work situation. And then sometimes it's almost like a farce in a novel. It's if Dave Barry wrote Cheers, is kind of what it is. And so I'm thinking now, to answer your question, but keep Renee's topic in mind. I'm thinking there needs to be a dominant person, and there needs to be 4 dominant people in each pairing. There needs to be a dominant person, but then there does need to be a central protagonist. It's not 4 protagonists. It is one woman's story. So that's what I was thinking.
It's hard to care in the experience of 4 or 8 people. You can watch 8 people in a movie or TV series, but to experience and have a deeper experience, you just, I mean, it's kind of like having too many friends. It's like after a while, there's no amount of space in your heart for a deep relationship. It's just filled. So, yeah, you just have to. The thing about adapting, and my friend Andrea Nasfell gave me the best advice. She actually adapted one of my books into a script. And I asked her one time, I was like, well, how do you do this? Like, what's your process? And she's like, oh man, you don't want to know. And I was like, well, I kind of do now. Like, now you have to tell me. She's like, I don't think you want to know. And I said, okay, well, go ahead and tell me. And she goes, well, I read the book 5 times and I never opened it again.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, what?
Oh.
But now that I've done it myself, I mean, she's right, because you can't take a book and just, page for page adapt it into a script. And the same's true the other way around, but it's like you've got the change is so dramatic in how we tell these 2 different forms of story, that if you try to keep elements from the other one, you just end up having a disjointed story for the medium you're writing in. And so it does take sort of knowing that story well, story 1, and then putting your writer instincts on and just going for it without pulling from the other story. Yeah.
So
I imagine. Sorry.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I imagine length. It depends on length as well. Like when I'm talking about fantasy novels that have all these POVs, like the one I'm reading right now probably has 4 protagonists, but it's 600,000 words or so.
Right.
So there you have plenty of time with each POV to get really
You do.
attached to each character. But in like a 90,000 word book, you'd be jumping from head to head, and it might be a little harder
Yeah.
to connect. Not that it's impossible, but
Yeah. No, there's there's writers who've done it. They've done it well. It's not impossible, but it's a challenge
Mhm.
for sure.
So I'm thinking of even that's what I started to say before is I'm thinking of even ensemble novels, like, so I'm going to say Hotel New Hampshire, even though it was a movie. But that, or Prayer for Owen Me, they're ensembles, or Oliver Twist, right? It's an ensemble, but there's still one central character in
Mhm.
each of those examples I gave, and that's who's that who that's whose point of view we should experience deep point of view. Did I say that right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
That
I
makes
think
sense.
it's every novel presents its own challenge. And so, the rule really is, does it serve the story? And if it doesn't serve the story, then, you have to get rid of it. For example, yours, John, you're, it serves the movie, 8 characters, or the TV series, I think is what you said it was. It serves the TV series, which has multiple episodes, but does it serve the novel? Do all the characters serve the novel well? And those are the hard decisions you'll have to make, as you said.
Yeah, and if they don't, I'll take it a step further, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. So in my brain, it's a series, right? And so those pairings I talked about, they would branch off. In the next book, it'd be this couple, and they're not
Mm.
couples, but you know what I mean. And then
Hmm.
the book 3 would be this other duo, and but if they don't all serve the story in the first one, that none there isn't going to be a second one. and 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 so yeah, that was a super helpful awakening.
I think that's another thing Frederick Brockman is really good at is his character. His has a lot of characters, but you're still in one POV, but you feel like he does a good job of bringing the other characters in, and but still just having one perspective. But that gets harder the more like you need to move characters around and have them separate.
Yeah, and if you have a character-driven novel, you know, that's a different um, thing to consider as well. And like you said, Emily, you can form well-rounded characters without being in their point of view, but
Mm-hmm.
they're just well-rounded from the perspective of your main character and how they see that character. It's their point of view of that character. And that's why sometimes there's whole, series, as John was mentioning, where you meet a character, you like this character, but we're never in that point of view. But in book 2, it's
Yeah.
their story and their point of view. And readers love that. I mean, whole series are built.
Mm-hmm.
I think of Karen Kingsbury, entire, almost a book empire has been built in that way of introducing families. And then the next book is this branch off of this family and these people. So, um, yeah, I think you just have to kind of look at the whole package and figure it out, and figure out also, I mean, one of the things that I I consider pretty deeply is how entertaining and interesting is this character, because if they're not highly entertaining and interesting, then I don't really want them leading the charge, even on a page or a chapter. I've got to keep my job as the writer is to keep that reader wholly engaged every page of that book. And if I've got a character who just can't engage the room, no matter how I write them, they're just flat. But they're important to the story, then I'll just put them as a non-POV character.
Mm.
So that character that you decide to sink deep in better have a deep well in order to draw from.
Ooh, I like that.
We
That's good.
just had Jamie Ogle on, Jamie Ogle Rene, and just last week, and so this part of the conversations reminded me about when she dropped the soldier in.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too.
the first few versions of the novel didn't have the soldier,
Yeah,
and then but that POV was important.
it was very important, and a lot of it her book has 4 POVs. Of Love and Treason has 4. You have the 2 romantic, like the couple, and then you have the dad and then the soldier. And the reason why those are important is because there's a lot of things going on where those other characters are not even present. And so it builds tension by showing what's like they know things that the main characters don't know. And so that helps build the tension because you know things that the characters don't know. And so it feels like they're walking into a trap. And, so it was a really clever way of doing it. And she did a good job of making you care about those characters pretty early on, too, so that it doesn't feel like too much of an interruption. And I would say those chapters also tended to be shorter. So that when you were leaving your favorite character, you weren't leaving them for very long.
Yeah, that's a good point. If you've developed your primary character correctly, there's going to be this sense that we don't want to leave them.
Yeah.
So if we leave them, it has to be for a really good reason. And that means that the next character you introduce has to have their own story and the well to draw from, and important information that's serving this story. It's sometimes hard for me. One of my least favorite types of books to read are these books that this is just my preference, okay? This is just me, where there's 4 storylines that we're following that don't tie together till the very end. So I'm following these 4 separate characters in their own stories. It's like I'm reading 4 books all at the same time that I don't get to figure it all out till the end. Now, this is just my personal preference. It's not right or wrong. But I think the reason for that is because I enjoy a story where I get to see how all of these characters interact and move the story forward together. And so, there's no reason you can't interrupt the protagonist's story, but just make sure that interruption has value.
And as you were saying that, I realized too that I didn't even think about this, but those other in Jamie Ogle's book, the dad and the soldier, if we were in their POV, then it had something to do with the main character. Always. It was like you knew that whatever happened to those 2 side characters affected the main character. So you still felt like, even though you weren't in her perspective, you knew that it was going to change the next part in some way for her.
That's exactly how it should work. And probably in Act 2, it's not going to be good. The things that are coming are problems and things that are going to cause trouble for your main character. So you're dreading for her before she even knows what's coming at her. And that creates a page turner.
I love that. This is kind of going in different directions. So if Jon Meyers, you have anything else to add to that, then jump in.
No, I was just thinking how smart Renee is, and after the last time you were on,
Oh gosh.
Emily and I just recapped and talked about how smart you were for about 5 or 10
Oh
minutes.
goodness.
And
Don't put that pressure on me. I
no,
just
and then my brain went, what if we had a guest to Jeopardy someday?
Oh,
And then,
yes.
but that might call out some of the other guests. So I don't know about that.
oh
We
gosh.
have other smart guests, but
That's
Well, you
funny.
know, Bill Bernhardt has been on Jeopardy,
I
so
know he's on the
he's
real
That's
Jeopardy.
right.
been on the real Jeopardy and won. So
Yes, man.
Anyway, that's what I was thinking. All right, go on your tangent, Emily.
So there was something you said way back that I thought might be good to go into more detail about when you talked about micro actions and the danger of like, because I struggle with this when I'm writing action scenes of just they move here, they do this, they move here, they do this. And I remember in the talk you talked about like somebody just getting coffee and giving it to somebody, and how you can fall into that trap of just describing it almost like a set, like a play or a film. And so, what tools do you use to change the way that you're thinking about those scenes or passages to make that more to go deeper rather than just showing the micro actions?
yeah, those, it all rounds back to this deep point of view and why they're going to get the coffee mug.
Mm-hmm.
In film, the it's story in motion, right? That's the rule of film. And so the characters, what we want to avoid in film are two talking heads, right? That's the
Right.
number one thing. We just don't want two people just talking. That's the worst. So we've got to put them in action in some sort of fluid motion. A lot of times they're walking across the room. I mean, if you watch any of the police procedural, they crack me up because it's always the FBI has come to confront a person and question them at their work. And the guy keeps walking, doing his thing, like he's filing and I'm just like, who in the world wouldn't stop for the FBI, but they just can't be bothered by the FBI and these questions, so they're just moving. But that is what makes film interesting is we have moving action. And so then what we think and when we're writing books is like, oh, well, I've got to have moving action for no reason. And that's not true.
Mm.
Everything has to have a reason. So in film, we're just making characters move, right? It's called blocking, right? We're blocking the scene just to have some motion. And then when we carry that over into our books, then we've just got these micro actions that just when you're reading it, you just bore it out of your mind, because especially when you open a book with micro actions. I mean, I've paid $12.99 for this book. I open it up. I'm all in bed and snuggly and warm and ready to just dive into this book. And, they're walking across the room and they're getting a mug and they're pouring their coffee and they put it on the table and turn the page and it's still happening. And it's bogging down the story. And in fact, the story, if I hope it's more than this guy getting coffee. If the coffee matters, then make it matter and show that it matters. And I think in my example in class, when I showed that same scene, but with inner monologue, with that deep point of view, with his thoughts behind why he's getting that coffee and what is getting ready to happen to this marriage
Mm-hmm.
that seems secure on the outside, but is getting ready to break into 1,000 pieces. Well, now you've got my attention,
Yeah.
and so micro action and really any action in a book has got to be shown to have reason. And if it doesn't have reason, don't put it on the page, because this is not a movie and I don't necessarily need my character moving, because in movies we're watching from the outside in books we're experiencing from the inside out. And that's the difference. So everything they see, everything they do, everything they say, everything they touch, everything they smell should have reason. And movies are very handicapped in many ways by the number of tools that they are allowed. They don't have smell, you
Mm-hmm.
know, they have sound, they have visual, they don't have point of view inside their head. And so it's what we see and what we hear. And that's it. And that's all you got in film. And in movies, I mean, in books, we have so much more to work with. Um, and I think we love movies so much that we want our books to be movies someday, and so we just write like it's going to be a movie. I've heard that actually so many times. I think it's bad advice,
Mm-hmm.
write this like you want it to be a movie. uh, I don't agree with that. I think you write it as a great story, and a great story can be made into a movie. But you're just going to end up writing a very shallow, uninteresting book if you're writing it using the rules of movie making.
I agree with that 100%. I agree with your disagreement. Um, I was just in a conversation yesterday in a screenwriting group that this guy's like, my script didn't sell, so I'm gonna write a novel and then that'll help sell it. And I'm like, I'm doing that, but I'm not doing it to sell the script. I'm doing it because the premise was a really strong, had a core story, and I want to tell that story. I'm not.
Yeah.
That's not why I'm adapting, because so that someday someone's going to turn it into a sitcom. And I'm doing it because I want to tell this uh, I don't know, this compelling story that people will remember as the book, as the novel.
Mhm,
and
mhm.
and then so then that reminded me of something that I'm forgetting right now. um that reminded me of, I don't know, I'm sorry. I forgot what it reminded me of.
Oh no.
Oh, when you were talking about the FBI guy, and then I caught myself doing that early on in the uh when I was outlining that, because you got to give them business, right? You got to give them something to do with their hands, right? But I made sure that anytime I gave, so first of all, I gave, in the novel they have less business, and but when they do, that thing that they're holding, whatever, that pair of scissors or that stuffed animal, there's a reason for it. Like, they're not just doing a Rubik's cube to fill up page space, right? There's a
Right.
reason for everything that they're doing. And
Yeah.
but yeah, we do fall into that trap because they have to have
Mhm.
business while they're talking, but that
Mhm.
business needs to have
Yeah.
be.
It needs to have, one of the things that we really like to play with in novels is metaphor, simile, and working theme and symbols all the way through, right? So, I mean, there's, if he's always tapping his matchbook, right, on the table, and this is a thing he does, and as we get move through the story, we realize he's had this matchbook since childhood. And as we keep moving forward, we then get to understand where this matchbook came from. And
Mhm.
this is a thread that's pulled very tightly all through the book. Now that matchbook's interesting, you know, um, the things that they do with their hands creates a nervousness. But again, visually that works better because we get to see somebody, their hands doing something with something. We're watching that through the eyes of a character. It's more interesting to know why they're nervous, what their interpretation of this thing in front of them is, um, as they think back to, childhood or relationship or other things. That's where you set into that deep point of view, is not always what they're seeing and doing, while can be important, but it's why they're seeing it the way they are.
Mhm.
um, why character A sees a police officer and is filled with hate, while character B sees a police officer and is filled with security. and the whys behind that.
Hmm.
And how they then act in the world with action because of that.
That's
That
so
also
great.
helps when you focus on the why. And again, correct me if I'm wrong. That it helps propel the story as opposed to, oh, here's the matchbook. Here's the, like, even if you know that everything has meaning, a reader can go, oh, this matchbook keeps showing up. Oh, this Rubik's Cube keeps showing up, and like starts playing a puzzle with it when really it it's you want it hidden in plain sight to where it illustrates about the character as opposed to putting all of these puzzle pieces together at the, like what you said at the end, and then in the last chapter all these un, unrelated loose ends all come together. If it's more compelling throughout the narrative, then the reader's going to accept it more as opposed to, oh, there's that bluebird again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one good point, is that everything that your reader reads, there's a part of their brain that wonders if this is going to be important later.
Right.
So the less work they have to do to remember, the more comfortable they're going to be reading.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've ever read a book where you're just like, uh, you're trying to keep track of characters and things and plots and all this stuff, and you're like, I don't feel like my hands being held very well in this. And it creates a frustrating experience. Like, you get to the end, but you're just like, wow, that was a lot of work, and then you go read something with fluff because you just are like, I'm exhausted. I've got to go do something else.
Yeah.
A good storyteller makes that easy for the reader. I don't have to work hard to remember that matchbook. And I trust the writer that they're going to make it known in the time that I should know it. And it'll be a reward, uh, for getting to the end, but it won't be a workout. And, it's readers like their hands to be held, but in a way that makes them feel like they figured it out also by themselves. And so when they come to that end and that aha moment, and they just go, oh my gosh, wow, and it all ties back, that's the sign of a great talented writer, who can carry them through 90,000 or 600,000 words, which that's a beast, 600,000 words. But either way, 90,000 or 600,000 words,
Mm-hmm.
if you felt carried and taken care of as the reader, then you're going to go back again to that writer next time,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a good feeling.
That's
Have you
excellent.
have you thought of a call to action yet?
Okay, so the call of action today, I think, would be to start paying attention to observation from yourself. Because when you can, I study a lot of comedy. I love stand-up comedy, and observational comedy is my favorite. It's my absolute favorite. The comics who study life
Yeah.
and can roll that into a piece of comedy just may I just love it. I
Yeah.
love it. I watch endless hours of it. But that talent for observation is serves the writer so well. But you just have to be acutely aware, and observing how people act. And then when you roll that into a character and start observing through your character's eyes, your fictional world, you've created a three-dimensional person. So being able to become hyper aware of observation in your own life and then in your character's life, I think will help you learn to sink deeper and deeper into point of view.
Yeah. That's great. I would love, let's see, I'm trying to think of how the reader or the listeners can send us something like either a piece of writing that demonstrates that, or what kinds of observations you made, however you want to interpret that. If you all want to share that with us, you can respond in the comments on social media when we share this, or you can comment on YouTube, or go to writebettertogether.com/podcast, where you can find the show notes for this episode and you can respond there as well. But I would love to hear that. I think that's a great exercise.
Yeah, that's fun. I do whole workshops where we just work on deep point of view and
great.
we write exercises. Once it clicks, it clicks. And from then on, you'll write that way. So it's fun.
Speaking of workshops, future guest Sheila Gunlock just came back from one of your retreats just last weekend. And tell people, and she's like, she said it was life-changing and her career changing. Tell people how they can find out about your next one.
So, yeah, if you're interested in my workshops or my retreats, I do these online and in person. If you'll just go to ReneGutteridge.com, and I have a coaching tab. And under that coaching tab, I believe towards the bottom, it says keep me informed. If you'll just fill that out with your email address, I'll put you on my list. And I only send this out when I have something coming up, but it'll keep you informed of things that I'm doing. And I'd love to have you at one of my retreats or workshops.
Perfect.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much, Renee.
She's not getting out of here until we promised on the last episode.
Oh, yes.
And she tells us the story about her biggest rejection.
Oh, my biggest rejection. It's a
then
great
she's
story.
free to leave.
It's a really great story. I think it's a very encouraging story too. When I was a beginning writer, trying to get published, I met with an editor who had read my whole manuscript, and I was doing the meeting with them. I had to pay for it as part of the fee that I paid. And I had gone with a group of my friends to this conference, and I was the last one to have a meeting like this. So I went to the room, met with this guy, and he absolutely destroyed the manuscript. There were red lines everywhere. He was super mean about it. He personally attacked me and what I was even trying to write. It was one of the worst experiences of my life, and it just tore me down in a way that it's hard to describe. And I was like 21 at the time, 22. And I remember I held it together, to my credit. And I remember walking out of the room, and all my friends were standing there at the wall just waiting on me with these, this expectation on their faces, like, I'm sure this went really great. And so I walked out, and they could see it on my face, and they whisked me to our van that we'd rented. And I bawled and bawled and bawled. And I really did not write for a very long time, like 8 months, until basically my husband was like, get off your butt and start writing. Like, this is ridiculous. You're a good writer, and you are going to make it, and you need to start writing. And so I did. Fast forward about 8 or 9 years, maybe 10 years. By then I'd published several books and done well for myself. And I was at a convention, and I was grabbing a taxi from the hotel to the convention, and I'm standing there waiting for this taxi. And this man walks up beside me, and it's him. And he didn't recognize me, but I immediately, obviously, recognized him. I could probably recognize him from his smell. And we get into this. It was some sort of weird taxi. I can't remember what it was, but the seats were facing each other. So we're facing each other in this thing. And it's just like a 3-minute ride over to this hotel or to the convention center, and he's looking at my name tag because you have to have the pass, and he's looking at my name tag and he's just staring at it. And I'm just staring at him, and he goes, "I know you." And I'm just like, I'm just breaking the sweat, And he's like, "I've read your books. You're a great writer." And I was like, "Thank you." And he just was jabbering her, and then he was an editor by then at a major house. And we get out of the taxi, and I remember just standing there watching him go up this escalator and just thinking, I almost let this man destroy my career and convince me I wasn't a writer. And here he is telling me he's read my books and loved them, having no idea, no memory of this 21-year-old girl sitting, across from him. And so that's my rejection story.
Wow. I did not
Wow.
expect that. That's amazing. Wow.
Yeah, it taught me a big lesson, that I've carried with me for years and years, which is, you can't let that person, whoever they are, keep you down.
Yeah.
We heard Renee. So we did Southern Festival of Books, and we talked to I think 306 people, a little over 300 people that just came through of the 2,800 people or 28,000 people or whatever crazy amount of people that were there, and we heard that story about like grad school professors who'd like. And then we heard people who still aren't writing because that guy it was like what they didn't have your husband to tell them you're a good writer. It was so discouraging that they stopped writing because of this one guy. So hopefully some of them are still watching this and they'll hear this story. We talk a lot lately, seems like ever since December, about these Holy Spirit orchestrated moments. The fact that you wound up in the car with them, that's not coincidence, right?
No,
with that guy.
It wasn't. Yeah.
And
for sure.
and you needed that to put a nice little bow on that experience.
Yeah, for sure. And next time, if you guys will have me on again, we'll talk about the writer's identity.
Yes.
Which is such a valuable lesson for this kind of thing. And I think it'll be a real epiphany when we talk about this to free some people from the bondage of fear.
Cool. Awesome.
Absolutely. That's huge. Looking forward to that.
Great. As usual.
Yes.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Who else am I going to invite to play this Jeopardy game? Just kidding. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
And we're back. She's so smart, man.
I know. That was great. I hope you all took lots of notes on that one.
I'm going to watch it again as soon as we get out of here.
Awesome.
So after we saw her speak, I had to start my novel over again.
Mm-hmm.
Now I have to start it over again.
Yeah. Learn something new each time.
But it makes it better.
Yeah. It's great. Hey, Jon Meyers.
Yeah? Talking to me?
Yeah.
Okay, what?
While I was in Florida, guess
Yes.
what kind of bird I saw that we have talked about before?
A junco. No, they're up here in the winter. The crane that there's a sanctuary in Mississippi, but they also go to Florida.
Yes, correct. The Sandhill Crane.
The Sandhill Crane.
And when we talked about Sandhill cranes and migration, you were like, why do some of them migrate or some of them stay in Mississippi? Mississippi?
Anywhere. Why do
Is that
they
what you said?
stay?
Like, why are they why not? Why don't they just stay together?
Yeah.
So I did some research on Sandhill crane migration.
And I'm guessing it's food related?
Well, so it a lot of it is food related. Also, this wasn't on the website that I'm about to share, but also makes me think that, if they were all together, there would not be enough food, right? They have to separate. So they're probably in these like flocks, like these families that are separating. But the other thing, and this is something I did not know until today, when I was digging deeper into this, is that there are actually subspecies of sandhill cranes. So we tend to just say that's a sandhill crane. I had no idea that there were different kinds. So when I talked about my dad seeing sandhill cranes flying over Tennessee, I was like, oh, I guess they're going to Florida because I'm going to see them in Florida, which I did. Well, no, they're actually going north.
Oh.
Because the ones in Florida don't migrate.
Oh.
I had no idea. So this whole time I was like, yeah, these sandhill cranes over in Florida, they spend their, their breeding time in Alaska, and it's just not true. They don't migrate.
Okay, I have to ask a question that every viewer is asking right now. Could you not tell that they were flying north and south, like when they were over?
Well, I wasn't there, and I wasn't paying attention.
Oh, okay. All right.
So I was just assuming based on what he said.
I get it. You didn't see him over your head.
So I'm actually going to share my screen for a second for this part. And I'll explain it for our listeners. What I'm sharing is the Sandhill Crane migration pattern map on Audubon. Can you see this?
You didn't hack into the FAA to get this, did you? Oh my gosh.
So what we're looking at is a map of North America. How did I zoomed out by accident. Hold on.
I don't know, but that's amazing.
So, oh no, I zoomed in too far. We're looking at a map of North America, and you can see these yellow lines, and it's starting off in January, so this is where we are right now. If I pause it, they're all going north, but they're going from different areas. We've got some going from Mexico. We've got some going from like California area, and like lots of different areas. So they're going to go north. And then you'll see they go way north, all the way up to like Alaska and northern Canada. And then here about, looks like September, they start going back down again.
Oh.
Isn't that cool?
That's amazing.
And you can see that some of them here are ending up in Florida as well.
Okay, do that again.
And then they're going back up. Those ones in Florida are also going back up.
Okay, I want to see you go back down to Florida.
And they take rest stops as well. And so that's what we're seeing, in
now look, I don't see any in Mississippi right now. So the ones in Mississippi just live there and don't migrate. Is that what you're teaching me?
I don't think any of them. I never saw Mississippi in the notes that I was.
Because there's a sanctuary in Ocean Springs, as we talked about in the previous episode. So, is it one of those circles that you're not going to know this? I'm not asking you to know this, but one of those circles is multiple birds, and so it has to hit a threshold before it winds up on this map too, right? If it was
probably
12 birds, they're not going to show up on this map. They have to be in a big giant flock. Interesting.
It also says here that there are 6 subspecies of sandhill crane. The 3 migratory populations are the greater, lesser, and Canadian. Those are found in, it says, California. And then it says the lesser sandhill cranes winter in Central Valley, travel from their breeding grounds in Canada, Alaska, and Siberia. Whereas the greater sandhill cranes that winter, it says here, I don't know what they mean by here, they nest in northeastern California, south central
at the Audubon
Oregon.
Society.
And also, okay, I was like, I'm going to at least look into this real quick before we move on. The Mississippi Sandhill Crane National Wildlife Refuge is along the Gulf Coast, and it says is a critical habitat for endangered Mississippi sandhill cranes, which makes to me actually sound like maybe those are non-migratory sandhill cranes.
Oh.
So
now we know. I'm surprised.
I hope I'm right, because otherwise I'm going to have to do this again.
No. Well, wait. Well, first of all, if you do, this is fascinating. So there's nothing wrong with having to do it again, like as a correction. But I'm amazed by how far north they go. They're way up above Alaska.
Yeah.
Those crazy sandhill cranes.
So that's where they breed, and then they come down for the winter, and then they go back. So
they go all the way. So I missed that part of the story. So they go all the way north to breed.
Yeah.
They don't breed while they're down on vacation in Florida.
I guess not.
Wow. Do they meet? So I'm keeping this PG. Do they meet their partner?
They mate for life.
Okay, but do they meet their partner? Do they pair up down south and then go north and mate, or they meet their partner once they get up there?
Sure. I guess the initial meeting.
Is it north or south? Is what
would probably be north.
Interesting.
Again, you ask me so many questions that then I have to just speculate. So
that's okay.
Nobody take this as, as fact, but Emily's speculation.
Mary Stella Davis will be very happy because we had a map.
Oh, yes.
I've been working on my novel, as you know, and I has to have a map now because it's one of her requirements.
Oh.
and so I'm like, there's so many opportunities to do a map, but it's not fantasy. It's actual, it's...
Well, yeah, because I was going to say the map's usually a fantasy thing.
Yeah, and so I'm not sure. Have you written non-fantasy?
Yeah.
How have you dealt with place?
The things that I've written that are non-fantasy usually only take place in a place, like a single location, because it's usually short stories. They don't travel much.
So it didn't. But what I'm saying is, did you name it? Was it Kylene, Texas, or you just didn't care where it was?
I did write a novel that was set in Tennessee, and I was very specific about the locations, and it also took place during the flood, and so that's probably the most specific that I got. Usually I haven't named places, but I feel like now I probably would.
It made me think about it leave viewers this. I'm forcing you to go back to watch RJ Jacobs' episode, and when I was thinking about it, because like when he said, well, it wasn't Chapel Hill and it wasn't Wake Forest, but it was Chapel Hill and it was Wake Forest.
Exactly.
And,
yeah.
So
it's like all those books by Stephen King that are like basically in the same spot.
Yeah, that's what made me think of it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Well, so there you go.
There you go. Now.
So, listeners, if you want to learn more about birds,
and who doesn't? If they're watching this show.
I promise not every fact is about birds if you're new here, but a lot of them are about birds.
Also, if you're new here, I'm not Jon. I'm Jon Meyers. And so the Jon that she was traveling with and had memories of college and stuff,
right?
that was not me, even though we went to college together and we're the same age. That was her husband, Jon.
It's true.
All right.
Subscribe to our podcast wherever you're listening so that you can stay updated. You can also go to writebettertogether.com. On the homepage, there's sign up where you can sign up to our newsletter. And that will help you know when we have webinars and the like. So you can stay updated.
You know what else? If they subscribe, they get to learn why this baby's crying. This one is crying because their parents thought he might like peas.
Ew, his mouth is open with peas in it.
Gross. Peas are gross.
Poor baby.
Don't feed your child peas. That's my advice. That's my parenting advice.
I think there needed to be more butter in those peas. I think that means it's time for the final act.
Oh, and today's game, previously you played Smush or Push. Today, I did not invent this game, but just like when you borrowed a game, you got new input, like you created the input for it.
Yes.
So this is Taylor Tomlinson's Push or Pull. And it took me a month to find a clip that she had not used for Push or Pull. So this is a brand new clip. You will be playing for this box of lenticular valentines. I know it's in the middle of March or April now at this point, but that is celebrity screenwriter Bob Sines got stepped on by this celebrity dinosaur and smushed on the bottom of his foot. I went through all 27 of them. Bob is not on any of the Valentines. The smushed Bob is not on any of the Valentines. Do you know what lenticular means?
I was about to ask.
It's well, I've used all of them, and so it's when you take the thing and you go like this, and it like the dinosaur jumps. You know, like there's a texture to the card.
Nice.
It's not that it's 3D, but it's like there's movement on the card.
Oh yes, like a holographic kinda
Yeah.
deal. Okay,
so,
cool.
And what a great deal that was. 27 lenticular Valentines for a couple bucks that were movement. I didn't have those when I was a kid.
Wow.
Fun zooming action. All right, now we're going to have our own fun zooming action. I need to share screen. All right, there's a series of 5 or 6 doors. Yes. A girl is approaching them, and you're going to say, do you push or pull to open the door? It's that simple.
Great. So listeners, I will try to describe what I'm looking at if you're not watching on YouTube. If you're dying to see the doors, you can watch on YouTube. Okay. So It looks like there's a handle on the door. A regular handle. So
there is.
It kind of looks like it's neither a push nor a pull, but that maybe are you asking which direction it's going to go in?
Correct. Does she push it to open it or does she pull it towards her to open it?
Okay. I'm going to say pull.
Okay. Let's find out if you are correct.
Hi, my dad built me my secret door.
A secret door? What?
Secret.
Ding, ding, ding. So door number 1, you were correct. So the first one you've won. She pulled it towards herself. All right?
Gimme.
Door number 2, describe it for the viewers or the listeners in their car.
Okay, so she's at another secret door that's red with like one of those old-timey knockers on it.
Correct. Push or pull?
I'm going to say that one's going to be a pull. Or sorry, a push. I think I'm going to say it's a push.
Let's find out if you're right.
Is that? Whoa.
I really hate being.
Oh.
What is?
It is also a pull.
Wait a second.
Oh my gosh.
Wait, it's not stopping. Wait.
What is that?
Hold on.
What is?
Okay. Whew. All right.
So
you missed that one. That one was a pull as well. The red one was. Now.
So I got that one wrong.
Correct. So
this one looks like they took a fur off of Sully from Monsters, Inc. and made a door out of it.
It does look like that. Except
it
has a human hand.
Creepy hands on it. Are all of these going to be pulls?
I don't know.
I'll say this because the handles have been on different sides each time. So I'm going to say this one's on also a pull because the handle placement.
Okay. Let's find out if you're right.
It's a hand. And it's my friend.
It is.
That's your friend? Wait.
You were right.
Yay.
The next one kind of looks like a wall.
Yeah, it looks like platform 9 3/4. Or no, not platform 9 3/4, but the wall that Hagrid dissipates.
Speaking of fathers, isn't this guy a good father?
Yes.
That he's made all of these doors for his daughter.
So many doors.
Push or pull?
Pull.
All right, here we go. This is my favorite game.
Well, what side is the handle on, though?
There's another door? Or is that a wall?
You want to change your mind?
I do want to change my mind because I don't see a handle on this one, so I'm going to say it's a push.
Wait a
There's
second.
probably 5 doors.
Oh my god.
Wah, wah, wah.
There was a handle on it.
So now you're 2 and 2.
Okay, the last one looks like, what do you call that?
Well, first of all, how do you know this is the last one? I mean, it might be. I don't remember.
Oh.
But if it is, you're 2 and 2, and this will be the tiebreaker.
Well,
if you get
on
it
the
right.
subtitles, it says door 5. Yeah, there's 5 doors, 5. Wait.
Oh, okay. That's how you know. All right. Well,
It looks
this will be
like
the tiebreaker. You got to get it
looks
right.
it looks like a safe.
Yes, it does.
I feel like one of these has to be a push, so I'm going to say this one's the push.
Okay, here we go. If you're right, you win.
Unless you tricked me and all of them were pulls.
What is this? Oh!
Okay, but we have to walk it back up because we turn it after. What's the password again? I put it in numbers.
Wow! Yay! You won.
Finally, a pushed door.
I forgot.
And then,
Congratulations.
wow.
Let me unshare the screen. You know how sometimes you'll say, "Oh, that was fun. We need to play this one more often." This is my favorite game. I love push or pull, but it's hard to find one that they haven't used on the TV, on the real TV.
Yeah.
All right, there you go. You did.
I tricked
you did
myself
well.
too because I had a feeling they would all be polls. But I was like, but he wouldn't show me one that was all polls. And so then I ended up adding pushes in there. So I didn't win the...
No, you did. You got 3 to 2.
Oh, yay me.
3 rights, 2 wrongs.
Yay me.
2 wrongs make 3 rights. All right. Well, great job.
Thank you.
You know what?
We
Couldn't have done it without you.
Couldn't have done it without you.